You know what's funny? There's a whole generation of people quietly paying for everything. Their mortgage, their kids' college, their parents' medical bills, and somehow still trying to scrape together a retirement fund. And nobody's really talking about them. Not TikTok, not the personal finance gurus, not the headlines. We're all too busy worrying about boomers who won't retire and Gen Z who can't afford to start. But Generation X, the people born between 1965 and 1980, they have some of the most fascinating, most misunderstood, and honestly most instructive money habits of any generation alive right now. And here's the wild part. Once you understand why they handle money the way they do, you're going to start questioning some of your own habits because their psychology around money didn't come from nowhere. It was built deliberately, painfully, by the world they were handed. My name is James, and I spend way too much time thinking about the mechanics of generational money psychology. If you're someone who grew up watching your parents stress about money, never got a clear roadmap for building wealth, and now feel like you're behind no matter how hard you work, make sure you hit the subscribe button and give this video a thumbs up if it helps you out. Okay, let's go back to the beginning. Gen X kids were largely what you'd call latchkey kids. That term sounds almost cute now, but what it really meant was mom and dad are both working. The door key is on a string around your neck. You let yourself in after school, and you figure it out. There was no helicopter parenting, no scheduled playdates logged in an app, no one asking how you felt about your day. You just handled it. And here's what most people don't realize. That environment didn't just shape their childhood. It literally hardwired the way they think about money. When you grow up learning that you can't depend on someone else to solve your problems, you internalize that message everywhere, including your finances. Gen X didn't grow up expecting a safety net. They grew up expecting a floor that could drop at any moment. And guess what? It did, multiple times. Think about the economic gut punches Gen X absorbed over their lifetime. The savings and loan crisis wiped out banks when they were teenagers. The dot-com bubble popped just as they were launching careers. Then 9/11 shook the economy to its core. Then, and this one hit hardest, the 2008 financial crisis obliterated home equity and retirement accounts right as Gen X was entering what should have been their peak earning years. And just when they were starting to rebuild, COVID. Look, every generation takes some economic hits. That's just life. But Gen X took those hits at the worst possible moments, during career launches, during home purchases, during the years when wealth compounds the fastest. This is where it gets really interesting because most people look at Gen X's money habits and say, they're so cautious, they're so conservative. Why won't they take more risks? And they're not wrong, but they're asking the wrong question. The right question is, what happens to a person's financial brain when they watch the rules change every decade? Here's the thing. Boomers got a playbook. Get a stable job. Get a pension. Buy a house. Retire with a gold watch. The rules were clear, and for most of them, they held. Gen X got handed that same playbook, but by the time they tried to use it, half the chapters were already obsolete. Pensions, almost gone by the time they entered the workforce. Job security, the era of mass layoffs and corporate downsizing hit hardest in the 1990s, right when Gen X was climbing their first corporate ladders. And the housing market, they bought homes, watched them gain value, then watched the 2008 crash erase nearly all of it. So what did they do? They adapted. Reluctantly, sometimes bitterly, but they adapted. And that adaptation created a very specific set of money habits that are unlike any other generation. Let me break it down for you because this is fascinating. First, Gen X carries the most personal debt of any generation in America. According to data from Credit Karma, the average Gen Xer is carrying over $61,000 in personal debt. That's not a typo. 61,000. But here's the contradiction. They're also better at managing that debt than younger generations. They carry more debt, but they make fewer costly credit mistakes than millennials or Gen Z. According to FINRA Foundation research from 2024, Gen X actually engages in fewer costly credit card behaviors than both of those groups. Um, how does that work? It works because Gen X treats debt the way a surgeon treats a scalpel. They use it, but they respect it. They've seen what happens when you don't. Now, here's the part that gets me. Gen X is often called the sandwich generation, and I don't mean that as a compliment. I mean they are literally financially squeezed from both sides, supporting adult children who can't afford to launch, and helping aging parents who didn't save enough to retire comfortably. 40% of Gen X is providing some level of financial support to both a child and a parent at the same time. Let that sink in. You're trying to fund your own retirement while paying for your kids' college and helping your parents cover medical bills. That is not a personal finance problem. That is a structural trap. And it explains one of the most overlooked Gen X money habits. They undersave for themselves. According to the 2024 Forbes Advisor Survey, 27% of Gen X has less than $1,000 in savings. A generation that is famous for financial caution, a generation that watched multiple crashes and vowed, "Not me." And yet, they're still chronically underfunded for retirement, not because they're reckless, because their money has been pulled in 6 directions at once since the moment they hit their 30s. This is the part nobody wants to say out loud. Gen X has been so busy being responsible for everyone else that they forgot to be responsible for themselves. Now look, Gen X's investment habits are genuinely interesting, and they're shaped, again, by everything we just talked about. Gen X investors overwhelmingly prefer real estate and conservative, long-term portfolios. They're not jumping into crypto. They're not chasing meme stocks. They watched the dot-com bubble. They lived through 2008. They've seen what happens to people who swing for the fences. But here's what most people don't realize. That conservatism, it's both their greatest strength and their biggest wealth killer. Think about compound growth, the single most powerful wealth-building mechanism that exists. It rewards people who stay invested and stay aggressive during their earning years. And Gen X, the generation that most needed to swing hard between ages 30 and 50, largely didn't, because fear is a very expensive teacher. Here's the metaphor I keep coming back to. Imagine 2 farmers. One of them lost a crop to a drought 20 years ago. He was devastated, nearly went under. So ever since, he only plants half his field, because at least if the drought comes back, he won't lose everything. The other farmer lost the same crop in the same drought, but he rebuilt. He planted the whole field. He bought insurance. He diversified his crops, and 20 years later, he's sitting on twice the land. Both farmers experienced the same trauma, but they made different choices about what that trauma meant for their future. A lot of Gen X is still only farming half the field, and the clock is ticking. Here's a number that should stop you cold. The average Gen Xer's retirement timeline is somewhere between 10 and 20 years away, depending on where they are in the generation. And the median retirement savings for a Gen Xer approaching 65, it falls significantly short of the commonly cited $1 million retirement benchmark. This is not a doom and gloom story, but it is an honest one. The habits that helped Gen X survive, the self-reliance, the debt aversion, the conservative investing, those habits aren't automatically the right habits for thriving. And the transition between those two mindsets, that's the real work. So what does this mean for you? Whether you're Gen X yourself or you're watching this because you want to understand and avoid some of these patterns, here's what I want you to take away. Number 1, acknowledge the trauma response. A lot of financial habits that feel responsible are actually fear-based. That's not the same thing. Responsible investing is calculated and strategic. Fear-based investing is reactive and paralyzing. If you're holding too much cash just in case, If you haven't reviewed your portfolio in years because you're afraid of what you'll see. If you're delaying retirement contributions because something more urgent always comes up. That's the trauma talking, not the strategy. Number 2, the sandwich has to have limits. Gen X, I say this with respect and genuine care. You cannot fund everyone's life at the expense of your own retirement. You cannot. A financial advisor's rule of thumb is brutal, but true. You could borrow money for your kids' college. You cannot borrow money for your retirement. Helping family is noble. Bankrupting your future to do it is not. Number 3, time is not on your side. But it's not against you yet. This is the most important point. Gen X still has a window, a real one. 10 to 20 years of compounding with even a modest course correction can meaningfully close the gap. Maxing out a 401k, a Roth IRA, and a health savings account, using all three simultaneously, is the kind of aggressive, multi-front savings strategy that can actually move the needle in a decade. The time for gradual improvements is running short. The time for decisive action is right now. Look, I want to be clear about something before we wrap up. Gen X doesn't deserve pity. They deserve understanding. They were handed an economy that changed the rules on them repeatedly. They were marketed the American dream, watched it get repriced out of reach, and had to rebuild their definition of success from scratch. While raising kids, supporting parents, and managing careers that didn't promise the stability their parents had. The fact that they're still standing, still paying their bills, still contributing to retirement accounts, still trying to course correct is not a small thing, but understanding why they do what they do with money is the first step to doing it better, whether that's you or someone you love. If this video helped you or shifted your outlook on how generational psychology shapes money habits, do me a favor. Share it with someone you know who's quietly carrying too many financial responsibilities at once and hasn't taken a real look at their own retirement picture in years. There's a good chance they need to hear this more than they'd ever admit. I'll see you on the next one.